Why do only Western countries make such a big deal about diversity, not Asia or Africa? Have you ever been to India? We have hard quotas. In my college, Google and Microsoft came just to hire women. There are always diversity issues. Just in what form and if you are aware of it. Even in groups like Chinese, you have subgroups. There's no getting past it. Racial diversity in Asia and Africa is very different. Some Asian countries we have close business ties to in the West, like Japan and South Korea, are very homogeneous. With others, there's a lot to say about diversity. Africa has some of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. But all those ethnicities would just be deemed black in the USA. Some countries have had civil wars between ethnicities, like Rwanda in the 1990s. That's why they do make a point of diversity today, to include all major people groups in government representation, and avoid another civil war. But from an American or European perspective, that might not look like diversity, because all the people are the same race. Because a huge chunk of the population is racial minorities in the US and many other Western countries. They do. China has an incentive program for the non-majority ethnicities. Your error is in assuming minorities in other countries must be white. Ethnic groups and subgroups are also minorities. Also, dude, South Africa has a pretty well-documented diversity issue. How do you know they don't? Do you actually keep up to date on the news in Asia and Africa? From what I've read and heard from friends who live or lived on that continent, Asian countries have their own issues with racism and discrimination that has nothing to do with white people. There will be discussions on diversity because of it. You're just not going to hear about it unless you look for it. Just their discussion on diversity will be more based on different ethnic minorities within a country rather than strictly skin color like it is here. Hell, I just Googled diversity in Singapore as an example. Do the same. You'll see what results come up. People within Singapore talking about diversity. Because there isn't much diversity in Japan or Africa? South Africa kinda makes a big deal about diversity. Y'all think? If your country of 100 people has one black person, it doesn't make sense to expect to see a black person in a position of power. If it has 10, then logically, about 1/10 people in power should be black. I would expect countries that don't have as much racial diversity would still have issues with ethnic, tribal, religious diversity. You just won't hear about it as much since Western countries hold much more political power, money. Yes, of course. I don't know if in Nigeria they discriminate against different groups. My point is, there isn't a large group of Swedes trying to have a voice in Nigerian life. You're not wrong to ask this question. And actually racism as a whole still has a huge undiscussed area we're not getting at. Especially in the West. Because in the West we're dealing with predominantly white power structures and that's our burden to bear and what we have to break down with the particular marginalized populations there. We also have a lot more possibility in the West, although it's diminishing, of upwards mobility for other races. And we value and promote marginalized voices being heard far more culturally than places like China, Japan, Taiwan to an extent, and especially countries in the Middle East. I'm not sure about Southeast and Central Asia, because I haven't lived there. I have, however, lived in Asia and the Middle East. And you are absolutely correct that diversity and anti-racism is nowhere near as developed overall as it is in the West. In the Middle East where I live, it is basically assumed that Egyptians Africans except South Africans. And Asians here are servant class. It's markedly rare that you will see anyone who is not Middle Eastern or white in positions of power. And it's also rarer, although less so, to see equity between genders. There is no upwards mobility for economic immigrants. They're there to take advantage of higher paying wages. Many send money home to help support basic life. And they're not there to climb the social ladder. They're there to survive with slightly less poverty. White Westerners there are typically also there for financial opportunity or for NGO or diplomatic work. They're not there to stay, for the most part. And when non-Muslim men marry into Muslim families, it is only through conversion. This system benefits the rich, who are mired in tribal wealth structures and wasta. And there is no incentive to help lift them out of poverty because there is no driving cultural push to make equality for all. It is a who you know culture that is focused on Islam and tribal relationships. 2. While Islam has many beautiful ideas and is very misunderstood in the West, part of the current reality is that many contemporary Muslim countries do still place restrictions, legal, financial, and religious, of varying degrees, on non-Muslims and foreign workers as well, because it is tied to governance. It can't be separated from state. Because Islam is a very complex religion with many different factions, it also can be a barrier to Western values of equality and opportunity for all. And the reality is that many people do not want to become Western. They have their own values and culture. This is a known issue affecting marginalized and disempowered groups that really isn't the business of white Westerners to spearhead. Though, it's an incredibly sensitive issue that needs to be addressed by Arabs and Muslims and by the repressed marginalized populations here, because any interference from white Westerners will be loaded with a lot of baggage from both Arab and Western cultures that will muddy the waters. Many Arabs reject and dislike Western values that oppose their religious and cultural beliefs, unless they've already been inclined to Westernize based on their own motivations. And exerting outside pressure on Arabs who already dislike Westerners is not going to help. It will only make the situation worse. The situation with racism is similar in Asia, although there are not as many smaller communities of different races because it is really not an appealing place for other people to move to. You get a lot of folks moving in the Middle East for economic opportunity, but that's not as prevalent in a lot of Asian countries because they're not as close geographically and the economic opportunity isn't there. And what you'll see more there is Asians being racist, bigoted towards other Asians, like Filipino, as only being hired as cleaners or laborers. Again, white Westerners aren't really the ones to fix this. There's been enough damage from colonialism and white interference that it's not welcome. 2 reasons I could think of is: first, they've had a history of colonialism and oppression. Other reason is in order to maintain their status as one of the best in the world they need to have the best talent in the world. In order to attract such people they need to be open and diverse. One of the things US did right. Open itself for immigration who now are a major force in driving research and innovation in the country. In past, during colonialism, they could take the best of the colonized countries by force. Since that is not an option, in order to still have access to those talent they still need to lucrative place to emigrate to for people from all around the world. Hence the importance to diversity. The Asian countries on other hand, aren't really on forefront of cutting-edge technology, and whenever they decide to be, they have an ample supply of quality and quantity. China's is a good example of a nation which is successfully harnessing that and quickly becoming a global leader. One of the major problems India is facing is brain drain. Japan used to be one of the leaders, mostly in manufacturing but innovation as well. But it's losing that spot due to aging population, overwork and lack of talent. This is just what I think. Whites have historically abused minorities in America, so bragging that they have diversity is akin to being racist but saying you have a minority friend. Because it hasn't become morally fashionable for Japanese to express guilt and self-hatred for the accident of happening to have the ethnicity they have. How many non-Asians are in Japan? Or for most of Asia, even? Same thing in Africa. We literally don't care. I can only talk about the Asian countries here, but I believe the culture that they have is different from the Western countries. They have something called a slow message culture in general, which means they take a lot longer to start connecting and befriending each other. Most Western countries, with some exception like France for example, if I am not mistaken, have a fast message culture, which I believe translates into how accepting they are of newcomers. Therefore people in Asia just aren't that used to taking in people they don't know. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It's quite a while since I learned this, so I may not remember it completely correct. Because Western countries buys whatever shit USA does and try to copy it. India, because of the rigid caste system, mandates that so many untouchables are in parliament. So, it isn't just the West. In my country in West Africa growing up, universities had quotas for different regions of the country that they must abide by. Because America is known worldwide as a melting pot and the majority of people in positions of power do not reflect that.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. TooAfraidToAsk is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.